If I ask you, how was life born? It's like asking whether the egg came first or the chicken. This question may seem simple, but it's actually quite hard to understand. So, do you know what elements make up water? Water consists of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, bonded together by covalent bonds. If I ask you again, what substances are in the air we breathe? In fact, air is a mixture made up of countless particles, including dust and water vapor. Now, here comes the question. What is life on Earth made of? What are the essential components of our existence? What substances separated us from lifeless matter nearly 4 billion years ago, and to this day still make us fundamentally different from other forms of matter? Without a doubt, in ancient times, many people pondered these profound questions before we officially begin exploring. The following content contains a lot of information, so please listen carefully and rest peacefully. Round the 7th century BCE, it was the ancient Greeks who turned such thinking into a profession. Philosophers like Epicurus, Lucretius, and Plato all explored the origins of life. They generally concluded that life comes from life. But how did the first life begin? In the 4th century BCE, Aristotle believed that life could spontaneously arise from non-living matter, as long as the material contained a certain element called vital heat. He speculated that maggots could spontaneously generate from rotting manure. Insects could be born from dust and DW, and eels could even originate from moist tree branches and decaying seaweed. Though it sounds unbelievable today, Aristotle's theory of spontaneous generation dominated human understanding of life's origins for nearly 2,000 years. Later, scientists kept refining the recipe for generating life, including the 17th century Dutch scientist Jan Baptista van Helmont, who believed that putting a dirty shirt and wheat germ into a barrel would naturally produce live mice in 21 days. But over time, such recipes for spontaneous generation lost favor. As science advanced, it gradually revealed the truth behind animals, mysteriously appearing in ruins and trash heaps. However, when it came to bacteria and strange single-celled organisms, the idea of spontaneous generation remained hard to disprove. Until the 19th century, French biologist Louis Pasteur designed an experiment where he sealed non-living matter inside a vacuum flask that was isolated from external influences. As long as the flask remained sterile, spontaneous generation was definitively disproved. Matter alone cannot create life. To this day, no laboratory has ever created life from nothing. Frankenstein remains fiction. Only life can give rise to life. But we also know that Earth formed over 4 billion years ago. There was no life at that time. No organism could have survived the violent, chaotic conditions of the Hadean Eon. Yet today, we live on a planet full of life, from rainforests to deserts, from mountains to deep seas. Life is everywhere. This means that sometime between 3 and 4 billion years ago, matter did indeed give rise to life. That was the only truly natural occurrence of life emerging from non-life in history. It was then that life on Earth was born. The next question is, how did it happen? And from what substances did it begin? The first life on Earth must have been the simplest form of life. There's no way mice could have spontaneously generated on the Hadean Earth. To trace the origin of life, we must first understand what qualifies as life. This is a massive topic that still requires the full power of modern science to study. In school, we usually judge whether something is alive based on life functions. Animals, plants, fungi, they grow, reproduce, and sustain themselves. But that's just the surface. Many things can do these things and still not be considered life. By that standard, some crystals, even computer viruses and algorithms, could be considered alive. Clearly, this is not how the scientific community defines the origin of life. We must look at it on a microscopic level to see what life is made of. Today, The simplest life forms are bacteria. They have two core components. One is a self-replicating molecule, such as DNA, which stores instructions for replicating itself. The other is an independent metabolic system that runs and executes these life activities. By this definition, all life on Earth is included. All organisms are made of cells, and every cell contains these two things at its core: a self-replicating molecule and self-sustaining metabolism. Even viruses exist on the edge of life. They also contain self-replicating molecules, but lack the machinery to make them, so they must rely on other organisms invading their organic factories to reproduce. Some scientists consider viruses alive, others do not. Some believe viruses are the key to understanding the origin of life, a transitional form between life and non-life. To summarize, the first life form must have had these two inventions: self-replicating molecules and a metabolic system. But these aren't simple inventions. Today's DNA is an incredibly complex, massive molecule. It's a double-stranded structure made of millions of smaller molecules, which in turn are made of atoms like carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And modern metabolism is a complex organic factory built around this polymer. Each part has a defined role, working together and depending on one another. Clearly, life couldn't have started off this complex. It must have begun with something much simpler. These earliest components were either already present on early Earth or were first synthesized in the primordial oceans. So to find the true starting point, we must look back at the chemistry of young Earth. In the universe, there are 94 naturally occurring elements on Earth. Each has unique chemical properties, affinity for others, and the energy needed to form or break bonds. Some elements barely react. Others, like silicon, react slowly and need high energy to rearrange. Though abundant on Earth, silicon is not ideal for forming life. In contrast, carbon is a better choice. It's the fourth most abundant element in the solar system, easily bonds with other carbon atoms, and forms stable bonds with common elements like oxygen and hydrogen. All life on Earth is built on carbon, combined with oxygen and hydrogen. Carbon forms what we call organic molecules. In fact, during the Hadean period, Earth was a chemical crucible full of org, sugars, the future backbone of genetic material, and key energy source for cellular factories. Originated from cosmic chemistry, formed in stellar nurseries across the galaxy, eventually drifting into Earth's early oceans. Nucleobases, simple nitrogen-containing compounds, combine to form the basic units of information storage and the language of self-replicating molecules. This repeating structure of 4 different bases recorded all the instructions life needed: how to maintain itself, how to grow, how to reproduce. To become life, they had to combine in very specific ways to form self-replicating structures and protein machines to execute functions. This is the key to life, and it leads to a paradox. Almost all life today uses DNA to replicate. The base sequences of DNA store complete instructions for growth, reproduction, and protein synthesis. But for DNA to work, it needs proteins. To read and execute the instructions, it needs workers to operate. The problem is, proteins are themselves encoded by DNA. In other words, to make proteins, you need DNA. To use DNA, you need proteins. It's like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg. And so, we return to the original question: where does life come from? Can life only come from life? Now, scientists believe the answer may be neither DNA nor protein, but another molecule that bridges the gap between the two, a prototype of the life system, the true starting point of life on Earth. Let me know if you'd like it adapted into a voiceover script, a video narration, or a more condensed version.